the game of a comedian and the game of a magician is to paint thoughts in the audience's mind via assumption. So every joke is when you shatter an assumption. And it's the same in a magic trick. Trying to think of it in a very simple way. There's an ancient magic trick where called the cups and balls, where you have a cup on the table, the ball vanishes from your pocket, appears under the cup. And once you've done that two or three times, where the audience thinks, oh, you've clearly got two balls, and that's how you do it.
Right.
The minute the audience thinks that, bang, you lift up the cup and there's an orange under the cup. And that to me is suspense and surprise perfectly explained. And so I try to use the same principles when I'm making a short, basically. So for me, it's at every step. I think David Copperfield, the illusionist, said he used to do grand illusions. At every step, he's thinking, what is the audience thinking now? What am I going to do next? What is the audience thinking now? What am I going to do next? And that's the mindset I have. People make different styles of films for different reasons, but that's what I go in with.
Good day, writer, actor, director, Ali Cook of most recently The Pearl Comb. Ali, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
I'm thrilled you're here. The Pearl Comb is such a visual. I think the best word to describe it is exquisite. Exquisitely shot, exquisitely written, and it just like expands what people should expect from a short film. As like most people think in the film industry, short films are for proof of concept of basically going on your path to making a feature. I think with The Cunning Man, which you did 5, 6 years ago, and then now this film, you've taken a little bit different. You've been a part of short films that are exquisite. Is that one of your particular goals when you went into this? Is I want to be a part of a film that expands the reach of a short film, or does it just happen that way that you were part of something so grand?
Yeah, I sometimes wish I could be more strategic and clever, and I wish I could go, "Oh, I'm make a 3-minute short that shows my version of Star Wars," or whatever. But unfortunately, all I do is I was on holiday in Cornwall with my daughters, and I heard about mermaids and where they apparently came from in Cornish folk tales. And I was just mulling it over, and I was like, "I think that could be a cool short film." And then from there, I started working on it, and it is probably enough to make a feature, but it
Yeah.
just ended up being the script was 15 pages, so I was thinking, "Oh, it may be about 15 minutes," but it ended up being about 26 minutes, and I managed to get it down to about 20. And so basically, it's just you just don't know until you get writing, really.
And it's brilliant. I can't wait to talk with you more about it. But I'm curious, Ali, how you got started specifically in filmmaking. So I think you've been involved in like theater, comedy, all sorts of different arts. What specifically drew you to filmmaking, the directing part of it, and writing?
It's really interesting because I'll be honest, I always thought in my 20s, I used to do TV magic shows in Britain for Channel 4 and Channel 5. And I was basically a presenter and a comedian doing magic and stand up. And my boss, he's a guy called Andrew O'Connor. He owned a big production company called Objective, and they were making Peep Show, which went on to be a famous sitcom. And he's the one who said to me, I should be an actor. And then I went into acting, but he was trying to direct a film, and he went on to direct a comedy film called The Magicians, and I used to think, "Boy, that's hard work." I
Right.
did That's all I really thought of it. And then I realized the first short film I made, The Cunning Man, I made that with a friend of mine called Zoe, she's a documentary director, and there was
Interesting.
a competition and for Ari Alexa where they said, "Can you come up with a short film to do with magic?" And she goes, "You know everything about magic. Can you help me come up with something?" And
Oh,
that is how it started. But then I realized all the stuff I knew from live performing, in particular, sort of doing one man shows and theatre. The structure of a one man show is very similar to a film, really. And then I just realized there was a lot of inherent skills that I knew, the most brutal one being having a pretty good sense of when people are getting bored. In a short film, people get away with murder because
Right.
If it's boring, they just say, "Oh, it's artistic and you don't get it." And whereas in a live show, if you're boring, people just stop watching. So I feel like I took
Oh,
that
that's
skill
funny.
and tried to translate it.
I love that. You just don't understand my filmmaking.
Oh, that's the classic for filmmakers. Yeah. It's like art. If everyone thinks it's bad, tell them they don't understand.
So on your website, Ali, you list left to right, directing, writing, producing, acting. Do you see all of them equal, or is that sort of how you rank it in a way, your art? If you had your choice, would you focus on one, or is it working different muscles where it's something different? It's hard to like, or your children, like it's hard to say there's a favorite.
I think my least favorite is producing. You need to be a great multitasker, and I'm not. And you have to have excellent people skills, of which mine are debatable. And so I think my two strongest things are probably acting and directing, I would say. But for me, it's interesting. Although I'm newer to directing, I feel as though from being a professional comedian and magician, I feel like that really translates because a magician is misdirecting an audience, and which means you have to be very much in control of the direction of the audience. So I feel as though that I think maybe that's the area I find.
Interesting. So, looking back on The Cunning Man, you wrote it, you acted in it, but you didn't direct it. It's
Mhm.
very similar. It has the same sort of exquisite look that you have in The Pearl Comb. It's exquisitely shot. There's so many great little scenes. I'm wondering how many times you had to shoot mosquitoes as part of it, how many shots went into that. But as you moved on to your directorial debut, what did you take away from The Cunning Man from that experience of making that short film that helped you with The Pearl Comb?
I think what happened with The Cunning Man was me and Zoe ended up being a very good team. And what inspired me to direct is on the day we were shooting, I felt like I was directing the actors, but Zoe was in charge of the shot list. And that was the area she felt very unsure of. But then when it came to the edit, because she'd been a documentary filmmaker, she was incredible. And I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. So that's what inspired me to want to direct is I felt like, I can actually I know what to do on the day, and can I get help in post, basically. And so that's where the inspiration came from.
Interesting. And so one more question before we get to the Procom, which I'm excited about. So you have a high profile, I would say more than most independent filmmakers, and maybe that's through your work in Britain, like you mentioned on TV shows and things like that. Have you found that to be helpful in your career?
So I think it's a little bit different in the UK. I think that in the UK, there's a lot of snobbery in the acting world, and
Right.
it's very much a closed world dominated by people who all seem to know each other and seem to have known each other for generations. And it's a miracle to even get an audition. And so, in a way, the very commercial side of the American industry feels a bit fairer in a way, but also
Interesting.
the fact that you might get an opportunity because you're big on social media feels nice in a way. But also, let's face it, most social media is horrific and has got nothing to do with making movies at all. And so that's where to me it feels like a terrible idea. Unless perhaps it's someone who does a lot of comedy sketches because they work well on
Right.
social media and then translating that into a comedy film, for example. I have a pretty big following because I used to do a lot of live touring around the UK, and you have to post on social media consistently. But anyone who does what I do in that world, we all hate it. So it's oh god, what can I think of today? Oh Jesus, and it is a royal pain in the arse. And it's interesting because I think in Britain, I'd say a lot of the sort of very established actors, they don't have any social media actually.
Right.
But it's quite easy for them because they were already established maybe 10, 15
Yeah.
years ago. Yeah.
That's funny, Ali. So when somebody sits down in the theater to watch the Procom, what should they expect to see?
Firstly, I think they get invited into a Victorian world, and then they're immediately thinking,
Mm.
this is gonna be a little bit sinister. But at what point does it become sinister? And that's the game that I play in the Pearl Comb. So when I made The Cunning Man, the world starts off very sinister and it ends up becoming very sweet at the end. Whereas in the Pearl Comb, it starts off quite sweet and almost like a fairy tale, but then ends up very dark. So I like to play that game with the audience where, and it's actually very similar to a magic trick, the way I structure films. In a magic trick, there's an old phrase which is
Interesting.
don't tell the audience what's going to happen, but keep them expecting because they know something's going to happen. So that's the game I like to play. And for me, the joy in making shorts is when you get to a twist, of which there are two big twists in the Pearl Comb.
Right.
I really like to really try and think of someone no one has thought of before. That's the joy for me. Is trying, and I think I managed to do it with the Pearl Comb. But it's coming up with that very unexpected twist is the fun.
And is that sort of your magician experience and experience when you bring writing that script? Because 'Cause I'm thinking so many short films, you end up doing too much telling rather than showing, and especially in a visual medium, you have a whole different things to work on. I mean, in a book, if you're writing a book, you only have one medium, right? The reader's eyes and the page, but on a film, you have so much more. So is that sort of where that mindset came from? Is it you
Yeah,
have that showman's ability to
well
put
well
that on the
well,
screen?
the game of a comedian and the game of a magician is to paint thoughts in the audience's mind via assumption. So every joke is when you shatter an assumption, and it's the same in a magic trick. Trying to think of it in a very simple way. There's an ancient magic trick where called the cups and balls, where you have a cup on the table, the ball vanishes from your pocket, appears under the cup. And once you've done that 2 or 3 times, where the audience thinks, "Oh, you've clearly got 2 balls, and that's how you do it."
Right.
The minute the audience thinks that, bang, you lift up the cup and there's an orange under the cup. And that, to me, is suspense and surprise perfectly explained. And so I try to use the same principles when I'm making a short, basically. So for me, it's at every step. I think David Copperfield, the illusionist, said he used to do grand illusions. At every step, he's thinking, "What is the audience thinking now? What am I going to do next? What is the audience thinking now? What am I going to do next?" And that's the mindset I have. People make different styles of films for different reasons, but that's what I go in with.
And what draws you to that particular style of the Victorian look? You would think if somebody's listening to the beginning of this podcast, they think a comedian, there's gonna
I
be
know.
based at a bar and would just be this comedy
Yeah.
about social media or something like that, that you go in a completely different direction on both of your short films that you wrote. What draws you to that sort of, period time
Hmm.
setting for these short films?
So I'm going to be totally honest. I think scripted comedy is by far the hardest to do because even if you have a great script, if the actors don't get the tone, it's very hard for the director to fix them on the day. And also, it's such a fine line between funny and just amusing. And to get that right, when you watch some people like Ricky Gervais in The Office or The Afterlife, I don't think people understand just how good that is. And to
Right.
be able to do that. And so I thought to myself when I first started wanting to do scripts is that the structure of horror and fantasy, it's similar to comedy in that you're going to get expectation and surprise, but it's a little bit easier because you're going after shock rather than a laugh. And so that's why I was initially drawn to it. Because I thought it would be a little bit easier. It turns out it's just as hard in a different way. But, but that was my initial thought, and then also, I do love magic, and I love to put anything to do with magic on screen. I've always to me, Star Wars, for example, it's a magical film, even though it's a sci-fi, but I love anything that
Completely.
has a magical feel.
And what has been your experience? So the Procom has gone on to quite a number of festivals now. What has been your experience watching the film in theaters with an audience? Because that is so cool to be able to do with a short film. So many are just put on Vimeo and somebody's on a
Yeah.
laptop, and it's almost unfair to the film and the filmmakers that people have to watch that way. So what's that experience been like for you to have people, an audience watching the film with you?
It's great to have an audience, particularly when you're lucky enough to get to play some of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
So we're at Fantasia now, and there must have been, I don't know, 200, 250 in the audience.
That's
So it's like a theater show. And because the film, I've seen it with a few audiences now, I just sit back and enjoy it. And I actually watch the audiences. So when the surprises are coming, I like to watch someone 2 or 3 rows in front of me, and I like to see if they're gonna jump or not. And it's really enjoyable. But the terrifying thing is when you have your first screening, because in a live show, if things aren't going well, you can adjust in the moment to try and win them over. But of course, with an
right.
edited film, it is what it is. And so if it's not working, you're screwed. So when I first did the first screening of The Pilcombe, I was so nervous. I was
Right.
terrified. But then by the end of it, I was like, yeah, I think we're all right. I think it's going to work.
I'll always remember, so I had a guest, Matthew Robinson, on in my first season, and he mentioned same sort of thing that you're doing. The comedy is a step up, and he mentioned that he always tries to put a joke in that first quick minute or 2 so he can tell whether the audience is with him. Because if they're
Ah,
not, then it's just like you said, you're sitting there and
yeah.
there's nothing you can do, and you realize it's not connecting with the audience, and it's gosh, that's a hard
Well,
place to be in.
there's definitely a couple of jokes in The Pearl Comb, even though it's a fantasy folk horror. I do have a couple of jokes within there, and they definitely seem to work. But when I was editing it, one of my comedian friends, he literally was, "Chop that out. I don't think it's working." And then I kept it in anyway, and then it did work. And that's the awful game that you're playing, is you've got no one
Right,
to test it on. Other than what I did do in the edit is when I got near the end of the locked cut, I got 2 runners in from the company where we were editing who had never seen anything, and I got them to sit down, watch the whole film, and give me their honest feedback. So I will do that. I also got the cleaner to come and watch it because I like to get someone who knows nothing to come and watch the film. And again, that comes a little bit from the magic world. People always think in magic, it must be hard to hide a secret from people. But the truth
right.
is, it's very hard for people to understand what you're doing, for the audience to understand what's going on. And I always think that you need that completely objective viewer to come in and watch your film.
So, does that mean there were clues in the film that led to the ending? So the ending was pretty shocking. I wasn't ready for it. Are there little things in there that I should have been seeing? Do you think that's sort of part of your filmmaking as a magician? You give little hints in there and that the big reveal at the end type of way to go about it?
There's definitely foreshadowing.
Yeah.
For example, the lead, Betty, she's wearing a brooch and it has a mermaid on the brooch. And it's very subtle and you only see it in a, but it's there.
Yeah.
Another thing, the opening shot when she puts the comb in the back of her hair, that's mirrored. That's at the start of the film, and then the same shot is mirrored at the very end of the film. And there are a couple of other bits of foreshadowing also in the opening scene. It's revealed that they are related, but it's brushed off as an aside, and we
Right.
find out that becomes much more important later on. So there's all the info is there, but it is like a puzzle. There's no way I think you could piece it together, although you are being dropped. It's not unlike when you watch a Poirot. They're dropping all the hints all the way through,
Yeah.
but it's not until the end you go, "Oh, I see," and then you get it. Yeah.
I think that's the best compliment I can give a short film is that you have to rewatch it. So, The Cunning Man is available on your website. You can rewatch it. I rewatched it a couple times just because it was so much fun to see, and I caught on to the little things that you put in there,
Yeah.
a couple of different things, and that just shows your attention to detail on your writing. So, it's unfortunate unless somebody's near a festival or going to Holly Shorts or following on social media of where the Pearl Comb is screening that they're not able to watch it. Do you have a timeline of when the festival run might be over, and then what your thoughts are on where it can run? Because it is frustrating. There are places short of the week and other YouTube where you can have a short film run, but there's almost just no distribution available for a short film other than your website or YouTube or things like that. It feels a little bit deflating to have go through all this stuff and then, yep, just now I'm uploading it to YouTube type of thing.
I know. I found that particularly with the Cunning Man. Is I had this great The Cunning Man got long-listed for a BAFTA, and I was,
Amazing.
"Wow." And then a few weeks later, it's, "Yeah, put it on YouTube." And you're like, "Wow, is that it?"
Right.
And what has happened, there are a few, sales agents for short films. And I found this more recently. There's a company in France, and there's a couple in Germany, and there's also one in Ireland, and we're gonna work with a sales agent in Ireland, and they do actually sell the short film, but it doesn't go
Okay, awesome.
anywhere towards America or the UK. It goes into certain parts of Africa, Germany, and parts of Europe, which I found quite fascinating. That there's certain TV channels in Germany that actually play short films, and then they may go to a few airlines and possibly streamers if it's connected to something else. And they felt like the pearl comb might be able to tie into something. So it might end up, hopefully, that maybe the pearl comb could come, maybe get part of, say, a Halloween special on a streamer or something
Ooh,
like that.
that'd be good.
Yeah, it would be fantastic. But it's still true, even if you, they said to me, even if you win an Oscar with your short film, the distribution is pretty small. It is what it is.
100%. One of my goals has been to invite people to the podcast who've won Oscars for their short films. And looking at the short films, people have not been able to go on to make other films, like, they've struggled, and that's an Oscar, that's whatever the highest
Yeah.
award we give to filmmakers. So what does that say for everyone else? It's like how hard it is
It, it,
if
it,
the
it
one award didn't amount to very much at all.
Yeah, but I think this is just the world we're in. You can get
Yeah.
very lucky, and but most of the time, there's so much randomness. You make a great short, and then the next issue is, can you get someone in who's high up in the industry to actually have the time to watch it? And if you can, they will probably hire you. But the hardest bit is, can you actually get someone to watch it? And it's just the way it is. There's not much way around it. And we all just keep trying. Yeah.
Love it. Pay attention to your social media, listeners. I'm sure you'll post of when the Pro Comb is available for people to watch, and you keep updated with your social media. So that's
Yeah.
even though you may not like to do it, you do keep a great tone with it, and I'm sure it'll be available soon. As a former soldier, 18 months in Afghanistan, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Kayaki. They changed its name to Kilo 2 Bravo, I think, maybe to for more people to be understanding the name. I don't know
Yeah.
why they made that change. But I had this whole text chain last night with my soldiers about British soldiers were issued shorts. I was not familiar with that. And it's a whole thing I found out about. But the film is fantastic. And I think one of the things that really impressed me about it is I don't know how much you follow the war genre and you act in this film. I don't know how much you follow the war genre, but a lot of times it's Navy SEAL on an impossible mission or special operation. This film just shows a day in the life of a unit, and it shows the camaraderie between soldiers and the really hard events that they suffered. And it's a true story that you're telling. So,
Yeah.
what drew you to that project? And looking back on it now, it came out in 2014. What are your thoughts on that particular film?
Kajaki was by far the best project I've ever done. And it will probably be the best project I'll ever do. It came my way very randomly. I met a guy who's a producer and he used to be an agent. And he says, "Oh, I've seen this script about a war film. You want to see if you can try and get in there?" When I went in for the audition of it, my agent at the time said I was too old to go up for it. And I had to fight with him to get through. And
Wow.
I'm like, "I'm literally trying to give you work." And then I met the director, Paul, who had made a living doing corporate health and safety videos. And so on the face of it, you would think wouldn't really be in a place to make a
Right.
feature film. His friend, though, was Gareth Unwin, who had won the Oscar for The King's Speech. And so there was that big connection there. And Gareth certainly helped, but it wasn't easy. They themselves really thought it was going to be a super low budget film. No one will ever see it. Great project to do. but in the end, they got help from the King of Jordan. He lent the helicopter for the end scene. Money came in from a lot of people who were wealthy connected to the British Army, so it was all privately financed. But it ended up being absolutely brilliant, and I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons was that he'd met some soldiers involved in this true story, and he just had a brilliant take, which is, you're absolutely right. Most films are the Hollywood version of war, whereas this is the grim
Yes.
reality of what it's like to be a soldier. And it's just another shit day on your
Yeah.
post, and then something horrific happens. And they also chose that story because it actually has the structure of a horror film, except for it's real landmines as opposed to being chased by a monster. So on a
Right.
technical level, that's why they chose that story. And it just ended up being absolutely brilliant. And it was a dream come true to actually do a film that was, again, it blew the British film industry out of the water a bit, because here's this guy, no one's ever heard of him, and he genuinely made the best film of the year. And it was just a real testament that we can all do it if we find a great story. And it really was just a great story. And I think one of the other things where we all felt really proud was we did have the big premiere in Leicester Square, of which View Cinemas gave us a cinema for free because of the worthiness of the story. It was quite amazing. And on the night, all of the actors stood next to the guy they were playing in the
Oh,
movie,
wow.
and
Oh,
all
wow,
the
Allie.
families were there, and it was pretty emotional, actually. And
Eh
yeah, it was just a great thing to be involved in. Yeah, it's amazing. And then on a fun level, we got to train with the paras, um,
Oh, cool.
which was really cool. We only went for a week though, and it was hilarious just how funny they are and how brutal they are,
Yeah.
basically. And we rocked up like a right group of thespians, like trying to hold a gun, and we just looked absolutely terrible. But
Oh,
within a few days, we looked almost believable.
it is true to life, this idea of this spends the first third of the movie just soldiers taking the piss out of each other
Yeah.
constantly, that's what it is, and so I think it really is a realistic, great film. You have a great part in it, and should be very proud of that film, Ali. I think it represents the soldier's experience well, so,
Yeah, we
enjoyed watching it.
yeah, every soldier who's seen it loves it, and because I think it's this is actually how it is. And I genuinely enjoy war films, but they nearly are always like, in
Yeah,
my mind, the Who Dares Wins film that came out in the '80s in Britain, where
right,
basically a load of crack team soldiers, they go and solve the
exactly,
day like James Bond
right,
without any problems at all. And I think it did so well. And it was interesting in Britain because it hit home with the right wing press and the left wing press. And it got 4 or 5 stars with The Guardian and, say, the Daily Mail,
that's amazing.
which quite an achievement for any film to do. Because and I think it did that because it just revealed the truth of what it's really like. So it was I just hope that one day I get to do another film like that. It would be great.
So, what is next for you, Ali? Have you started working on another project that you can talk about?
Yeah, I have a horror film in a similar style to the Pearl Cone, but it's set now,
Okay,
and that's called The Grimoire, and I've been developing that for a while, so I'm working on that, but that's a feature. And then I've
nice.
just started working on writing a ghost story as well, which is another feature. So I'm attempting to jump to features, but of course, it's not easy because there's so many different parts of the puzzle that you really are in the hands of the producers as well. But I am currently working on those.
That's fantastic, and I'm sure they'll maintain the same quality that you've done in your shorts of just being so well written and films that you need to watch a couple times to just get all the little things that you are putting in there that make the story so strong. So that's what I loved about your short films, Ali, is just how many little pieces were in there that make the story strong. And I think that comes from the script, right? You must have spent a lot of time on those scripts and you didn't just write it out, send it up. Like you must have labored over those lines and put those things in there to make sense at that so the end makes sense from the beginning.
Yeah, I wrote the grimoire with a guy called Eric Garcia, and he rewrote the grimoire for me to polish it up. And he gave me a lot of pointers really. and he's Eric Garcia made The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which was a very good horror film, and he's also rewritten a lot of famous directors' scripts. And one of his things he always said to me, which you may have heard before, but he said the ending ideally should be surprising yet inevitable. And he says he goes, that's what he's always aiming for. That you, when it comes, you're like, oh, and then you're like, oh, of course, that makes sense. And he says that, and that's the dream. And I think we did it with the Pearl Comb. You can't always do it. You can't always find the ending, but I think we managed it with the Pearl Comb.
So, Ali, on this podcast, surprising but inevitable, the end is asking indie filmmakers if there is a film or filmmaker that they wish more people knew about, somebody that they or a film that they really loved that you don't. I would say I will include Kilo 2 Bravo in this. I think for an American audience, definitely check that out because that is something that I feel a lot of Americans, especially in the service member war type film, haven't heard of. So check that out. But for you, is there another film out there or filmmaker that you wish more people knew about?
Yeah, it's actually a very tough question. I would definitely
It
put
is, yeah.
Kajaki there, which is
Yeah.
directed by Paul Katis. However, I actually saw a film here, Fantasia, the other day
Fantasia?
that I think people really should check out, and it's called The School Duel.
Oh,
The director is called Todd Wiseman Jr., and it's a film all about gun control,
okay.
and it's very interesting. If you don't mind me revealing the premise,
Go
it's a
ahead,
it's
yeah.
a dystopian future where there are now no gun laws at all. However, once a year, all of the schools have a competition where boys can volunteer to enter and they duel each other until they all die and one wins.
Oh gosh.
And it's just a very clever satire on about what's happening with gun laws and what's going on, and it's just done in a very smart way, and it doesn't give you any answers. It's almost comical, but I'd
Yeah,
say it's genius level, and you should definitely watch it because it just makes you realize all the complexities surrounding the
right.
issue. So I think it's a really smart film, and I think it's just come out and it's worth watching.
Love it. It sounds like they have taught us a very similar style of filmmaking that you do, taking sort of a complex thing and then bringing it down to something that's both tragic, funny, sinister, laughter, like combining all these different elements. I think that's what great filmmaking is, right?
That's always the dream. You can't always do it, but you're always trying to get there. Yeah, definitely.
Love it. Ali Cook, the film is The Pearl Comb. You can go back and watch The Cunning Man on your website. Highly recommend. It's a fantastic film. Ali, thanks so much for joining me.
Cheers. Thanks very much.